I am very happy to introduce our keynote speaker today. Some of you may have already seen him present yesterday because he was in our Spanish language track with his brother, Jose. Since this is an audience of threat hunters, probably a lot of you either know him or know of him, possibly by his real name, Roberto Rodriguez, or by his handle, he goes by Cyber War Dog. Roberto is a principal threat researcher at Microsoft, but I think he's much more well known for a lot of his public contributions to threat hunting. He's the force behind the threat hunting elk stack, HELP. He started the Threat Hunter Playbook. He publishes the Mordor threat hunting data sets, and he is the principal and does a lot of work with the Open Threat research team. So Roberto, thank you for being with us today.
Yeah, thank you very much, David. Thank you for the introduction. It's amazing to come back to the Threat Hunting Summit for being part for a couple of years already, either by just attending or maybe speaking a little bit. But now just part of the keynote, it's an honor. So thank you very much for the opportunity. To all the organizers at SENS, I also want to thank everyone behind the summit, because there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes, right? We all see these great presentations, but there's a big team behind it. So thank you very much for doing that. I also want to thank my Latinx friends, so all mis amigos latinos, amigos y amigas que también están presentando en este summit. Es muy importante ver la diversidad, la comunidad latina, y también ser parte de toda esta comunidad que es el infosec community. Ahora, now in English. So thank you very much for my Latinx friends, right, that took the time as well to come and speak in Spanish and being part of this summit. And I hope that this, of course, happens more often. It's fun to be able to speak on your own language as well, right? And then today, I'm going to be talking about the concepts behind, I would say, collaboration, some of the community that goes behind it, how you can identify some opportunities to maybe start contributing somewhere. But at the same time, how you have to give it a little bit of the community approach to this collaboration effort. I'm also going to go through a few obstacles, things that I've seen that has happened to me, and also a lot of the stuff that I've done to feel better and continue and not freezing because I feel that I cannot maybe accomplish something. So I hope that today this is not only inspirational, but also allows you to feel more comfortable and maybe get ready to start contributing and collaborating either internally or externally with the InfoSec community. As David mentioned, my name is Roberto Rodriguez. I'm part of the Mystic team, the Microsoft Threat Intelligence Center, specifically in the R&D division. I love open source. I'm also one of the founders of the Open Threat Research community, which is a community that encourages collaboration and also development of open source projects. I love dogs, and I love also, once again, just to contribute back and start sharing as much as I can so that maybe I could help someone out there, or maybe I can just get feedback and see if I can improve all the things that I'm thinking that might be a good idea to share. And if you want to learn more about my open source projects, you can go to the OTR GitHub repository and you can see everything that I do there, contributions that I do maybe on a daily basis as part of my job, but also sometimes I take some of my free time to then contribute back as well. So in this keynote, I would like to start with this phrase, right? If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And I heard this already. Well, the first time that I heard this was from a presentation that was given by John Lambert from the Mystic team as well. He's the general manager. And the approach that was given to this is that us as a community, right, we need to start sharing as much as we can so that we can start going far and not just maybe get the intelligence that we all get, for example, through Twitter, but at the same time, just go back to our organizations and start working on our own. And then there is not much of that collaboration with others or sharing that information. It could be in a form of a detection, could be in a form of a data set, etc. So the idea here is to be able to collaborate right together and pretty much as a whole, as a community. But when I start looking into this, right, my first question is, what if I want to go fast, but at the same time go far? And when you start thinking about it, the relationship between going fast in something is with going alone. So technically, I would say by default, I would, so to me, I would say that if I go together or with others, might not be as fast. And that's not the reality of things in InfoSec, right? We want to go fast. We also want to go far. So at the end, for me, it was very interesting to understand what that go together actually means. And we started getting into the collaboration, I would say, concepts around this. And this could be anything, right? For you, you might have several definitions for this. So I encourage you to think about what that actually means to go far when you work in your organization or when you want to collaborate with a community. But for me, for Science Threat Hunting Summit 2021, I would say that if you want to go fast and far, right, you can start, for example, planning together, start brainstorming with others, either, once again, if it's only internally or even if it's externally, try to understand the short-term, long-term goals, the scope, the risk of everything that you're doing. But at the same time, you can start working on your own in some of those tasks that you might be assigned. And that's, once again, the reality of things. And it's not wrong to work on your own sometimes, but always thinking how what you do helps the overall goal of the team. And at the same time, how you can actually start helping others with what you do, right? So it's a very important thing to do. And the next thing for me, it would be empowering others in general as well. So if you're working on something, how you share that knowledge with somebody, once again, as I mentioned at the beginning of the talk, is you're not only helping someone, but you're actually getting the feedback that you might not get, for example, with your team internally. And you can start maybe getting that feedback from others that might have a different experience that you're having at your job. You might get the feedback from different backgrounds, for example, ways of thinking. And that's super powerful when you want to start not only, once again, helping others, but you want to evolve also as a researcher. And we want to adapt quickly as a team, right? In cybersecurity, that's the thing. Every challenge that you face every day, there's going to be situations where you have to, for example, create a new research lab environment because the vulnerability that was exposed, you didn't even think of. So you have to make sure that you go back and have the processes in place and the resources that would allow you to do that, right? And then finally, think big as a team. Think about this big picture, how what you do is going to affect others in a good way, of course, but also maybe it might not align with the goals of the team. And this, once again, applies to community. What are the projects that we're going to be working on and contributing to the community that would benefit the most overall, around the world? I can think of something very innovative, but might not be something that we need at the moment as a community. So think about that when you start thinking going fast and also going far. But then when we start thinking about together, this is very important for me as well. And this is a very interesting TV series that I watched this past couple of weekends. But there is a lot of challenges that we're going to face. And it's not only that we should go together, face the challenges, because sometimes we don't even care about the other person that is working on a similar path or the same challenge. We have to start thinking more about working together towards that challenge. And in this TV series, it was very interesting how there is a lot of games, but only one is the one that was actually used to start collaborating and then start caring about each other's well-being. Otherwise, they won't be able to complete the game. And that takes me to the next topic, where everything that we do is not just a matter of adding more people to the problem, let's say, right? Just throw in 10 different people. I need 20 more people to this problem. But actually, you have to start giving it a more community-based approach. And one of the core goals of community is to actually care about each other. And that's what makes a community, right? For example, this is something that I was not thinking about it, but then when I started reading about community in general, it's like going to a soccer game. We all are rooting for the same team. We all feel that we're part of this whole team. But at the same time, we do not care as much about the people that are in the stadium. Like, I love the sport and I want to just focus on who's playing, how they're playing, strategies, etc. And I get super happy, right? Just watching soccer. But I don't care as much as others in general. right? When we leave the stadium, like I don't remember who was sitting next to me. And that's what happens a lot in the community and also happens internally at work, where you don't only have to be part of a team, you have to start caring about each other. And I remember that I also read this book, The Art of Community. And this is a book that thanks Gregory Bell from Corelight. He's one of the co-founders, and now he's a chief strategist. And he shared this book because we were talking about community. And to me, this is very important, once again, that a community is a place where, yes, you share a common interest, and you can also feel welcome. But at the same time, we have to really care about each other, the mutual concern for one another. And also, once we start caring, understanding, listening to others that we're collaborating with, not only internally, but externally, we can also start understanding how the other person might want to grow. What are the expectations and how you can start helping them? And that's huge. That's just something that sometimes we forget. And that takes us to the next topic that, and before that, if you want to take anything out of this presentation, just a mutual concern for one another would be enough, right? For example, David Bianco did a keynote last year, and the topic was how to also be a good person, right? A good human being. And that aligns directly with this, that you have to care about the other person, or in general, your community, if you really want to make a change, right? So keep that in mind after this presentation. But something that now takes us to, let's listen to each other. If we really care about the other person, we have to listen and understand that we should not be judging or measuring the success of somebody else, just assuming a specific way how they should do it, right? So in this case, everybody is a genius, but if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it would live its whole life believing that it is stupid. And that's very powerful to me, because we, for example, we do not learn the same way. As researchers, there's different ways that we can start, for example, approaching a problem, etc. So us, for example, let's say as team members or managers should understand those strengths and weaknesses in order to help this person, right? And be able to create an environment where you can start being more proactive, maybe go faster now because you understand what is the strength of that person. How is this person going to take the path of research, for example? So very, very important. So please remember that we're all different, and it's okay to be different. It's actually amazing to be different because you're going to bring a lot of different perspectives, once again, from different backgrounds. We talk about diversity. Speaking a different language, we might see the world a little different. So accept that diversity and make sure that you don't make assumptions and use your bias to start judging somebody else, either internally in your team or also in the community. So now that we understand, for example, that we need to start collaborating in a certain way, right? Being on the same page, understanding scope, risk, long-term, short-term goals, but then also caring about each other so we understand who we are, how we're going to approach a problem. We need to start maybe understanding where we can find now some opportunities where we can start collaborating. And once again, not only in your team, with other teams in your organization, but with the community in general. And for me, as part of the Threat Hunting Summit, I think that one area, because threat hunting goes through a lot of different stages, different areas, different people working in a threat hunting team. Of course, depending on the resources that you have, but there is a lot to cover with threat hunting. So for me, I like to focus on the threat research methodology, trying to keep it very basic. These are the 4 main steps that I have used for the past couple of years. And everything that I do, even open source wise, falls into these categories. And that's what I want to have some type of organization to what it is that I do at work and also with the community. So for example, identifying the offensive tradecraft. Right here, there is a direct opportunity, first opportunity to collaborate, not only internally with your Intel team, for example, right? Understanding what might be the risk, the threat landscape, right? My objectives as a company. But then you can start actually interacting with people that might be building the tools that you want to use for research. either if it's an offensive tool, for example, in this case, identifying tradecraft, or any tools that would help you to analyze that. But I do that a lot. For example, if I find a project that I'm using as part of my research to understand the behavior of the techniques being used, I like to reach out to the person behind the tool. There's a lot of amazing researchers out there, that would definitely give you some of the time to explain the tool and explain the things behind it. And they benefit a lot also from the defense approach that you want to give it when you want to analyze that tool. Next step, right? Dissecting tradecraft. A lot of different things going here, right? All the way from static analysis, dynamic analysis, to understand behaviors, the implementation of technology. And here's when you can also start reaching out to others. Not everybody has the privilege to have a reverse engineer 24/7 available or part of your team. So there is an opportunity here where you can start identifying who you might be, work with. Most of the time, people that are developing the tools understand how to dissect the tool. So in the first two steps, you can actually get a lot of a collaboration with others that are developing these tools. At the same time, it's important to understand the telemetry behind it. Any practical telemetry, something that you can collect maybe also very easily with your current agents collecting data, or maybe you have to go very deep and build tools to collect additional telemetry that will give you better results. But understanding here that depending on, once again, the resources, scope that of your team or your organization, you have to understand also when it makes sense to maybe go very deep. How much time do we have? Maybe keep a short-term goal, have a long-term goal to understand how to collect this not practical, right, telemetry to collect. And then at the end, of course, developing a detection that goes through a lot of different phases, starting, of course, with understanding the quality of your data. A lot of collaboration opportunities in there as well, because you need to start interacting with those that are either enabling it or maybe maintaining, right, the configurations to enable telemetry. So you start identifying things internally. Externally, it will be nice to understand how all these relationships, all these patterns that you find in your data, how those could also be shared with others in the community and empower those that might not have the resources to do that. This, of course, is a cycle, right? There is a lot of feedback loops. There is not a direct line. There's always something where you have to go back to the previous step, understand what you can do better. And then, of course, we can extend this. There's going to be a lot of branches. We can talk for hours about this, right? A lot of things that, that we can actually do in each step. And I recommend, if you want to start thinking about collaboration, not only internally, but externally, to start creating these processes in your organization. Today, we only talk about threat research methodology. There is a lot that this connects to. So do the exercise. And if you have not done that yet, you're going to be surprised. So there is going to be a lot of things that are similar to this type of processes. But now, how can you start then aligning some of the things that you do with community collaboration? And to me, is very, well, the names did not show up in there. But pretty much, I'm going to talk about the names in here. So there's going to be a lot of open source projects that are going to be around all these different steps. And in here, for example, when it comes down to intel or sharing a technique, you have MITRE ATT&CK, all the way to validating, for example, in the stages of understanding the technique, and also from the detection side, validating the technique, right? There's going to be a lot of stuff that you might come up with that, of course, not everything can be shared, but anything that can actually be shared, why not share it with these other open source tools? So that way you can, once again, empower others that might not have the resources, but they are so desperate to have a proof of concept that is part of open source tools, for example, like the Atomic Red Team project from Red Canary. If you have data, let's say you don't want to share any steps like to execute something on an endpoint. Well, let's share the data at least. Data is going to allow you to then get to the stage of potentially building a similar detection, but at the same time will help you to validate that detection, right? So keep that in mind, because don't just stop because you think that, you know what, I'm not going to share any code. Well, there is another thing that you can do. So identify those additional opportunities. And of course, at the end, share a detection logic, right? Either a Sigma rule, understanding the capabilities of the project, all the way to maybe a detection model through a Jupyter notebook, something that could be repetitive, right? So people can benefit from this. So make sure that you start doing some of this in your organization. And I think it's going to definitely help the community in general and your team as well, not only to go far, but also go fast, because you're enabling other people with the resources that you have. Now, the question is, are we doing all this yet? And yes, I've seen a lot of teams following a similar pattern in the community, right? For example, the Open Thread research community, every time there is something new, well, most of the time, because we are just a group of people that are sharing, collaborating, we try to write, for example, a Sigma rule, share a data set, right? Every time we share a Sigma rule, and then share other resources that might help people. For example, research environments. If I understand how to, for example, do the analysis of a new technique, I would like to share that research lab and then maybe make you go through the same process if you want to, right? If you have the resources. And some people use those resources, enable more telemetry, add more configurations, and they come out maybe with additional context. So keep that in mind. That's so important to do so that we can start moving once again, going far and also going fast together as a community. But to me, I also wanted to understand what is stopping others in the community from contributing. And this applies internally and externally, right? But I was trying to just have a community understanding. So let's say almost 300 people went through this, and the top one is not enough time. And we're going to go through the other ones, right? But just think about that, not enough time to contribute. And contribute could be as basic as maybe helping the documentation. But then you could tell me, I don't have time to read documentation. And that's true, and that's acceptable. The solution should not be, well, you should take more of your free time during the weekends. Maybe don't go out and then stay home and, and then work on something. That's not the solution, right? It is not. So for me is, why don't we take this previous approach and maybe start aligning what we do, once again, in our jobs with open source projects. And I think that that's going to be, it is not going to be that easy because you need to have a pipeline, like how something that you do will end up also public, but it is not impossible. I do it, a lot of people have done it, and it has a process, but it's not impossible, right? And I think that it takes your team, maybe you as a manager, or maybe you as a team member, to maybe define what that process might look like. And we keep doing bring your own computer, right? Bring your own machine learning model. Why don't you bring your own contribution to your job, right? If you want to contribute and you don't have time, why don't you bring it to work, right? Understand what you're doing and align it with something that exists out there, or maybe develop something that does not exist out there, right? So keep that in mind when you start thinking about these, processes. Something that I love to see is job requirements in general. It could be qualifications, it could be responsibilities, what it is that you're going to be doing. And this is one from Mystic, for example, and I was so happy to read this. One of the qualifications is experience building a community and sharing blog posts, technical write-ups, articles, etc. That's powerful, and I have not seen that before. Every time I would apply, I would get scared of a lot of the qualifications. But now I could say that just by taking some of the time, you can start maybe right away just qualifying for one of those things right away, right? And it's not as hard. Once again, it doesn't have to be a full restructure of code. It could be as simple as maybe, hey, I don't understand this. This is my feedback. You're already contributing. So keep that in mind for those that are doing job requirements. Once again, does not have to be a qualification only, can also be responsibilities, so that way you can give the opportunity to that person to develop those skills also and be ready to start contributing more. Next one is imposter syndrome, another very important topic, right? It's very interesting. It's the number 2 reason why there are not too many contributions, for example, to open source projects. So I believe that we are good with maybe now bringing your open source contribution to work. But what do we do with with imposter syndrome? And you can have the best team. You can have a lot of people in your team, resources, money. You can have processes in place, beautiful Kanban boards, right? You can have maybe now the time to do research, like now the company is giving you that opportunity, or you align yourself, your processes to contribute. But at the end of the day, if you don't believe in yourself, or if you doubt yourself, then how are you going to contribute? So keep that in mind. That's another powerful thing, right? Because you cannot throw money at it. So to me, it's very important to first identify, right, what it is. For example, I'm not ashamed to say that I do have imposter syndrome. And it's interesting when you start thinking about it, that, for example, sometimes I might not feel that I'm doing enough. Every time I see a great presentation with some innovative research, I feel like, man, I don't know anything about this in cybersecurity, so I might not be good enough. And to be honest, feeling that way, it's not bad. Actually, you can take advantage of that, and you can actually use it in a good way. And I'm going to talk about that in a little bit. But there is types of imposter syndrome, for example. And I did not know that either. I always thought maybe you doubt yourself in general. And so that's, right there. But for example, a perfectionist can have imposter syndrome because you want everything to be perfect. The moment something doesn't go as expected, then you feel that you might not be actually good. Something did not happen accordingly, so I'm not good at this. All the way to the soloist. I want to work on my own because I'm afraid that if I ask questions, they might maybe discover that I'm not as good as I say I am, right? So there's a lot of these questions that you have to start first understanding if you have this imposter syndrome, which once again is not a bad thing, but then understanding why, right? Like what's going on with you? Why do you feel that way? And that's what I love to approach this from a community caring about each other, so that we can understand what it is that we can do for maybe that person that might feel that way, or also have resources available so that you can feel that you can talk to somebody because you feel that that person cares about your development and your growth, not only as a researcher, but as a person as well. A few tips. In general, I love this. Think about the positive that you've done. Small wins is fine. Through the whole year, write a couple notes. What did I do? Even if it's 2 or 3 things, you did something. You helped somebody out there. If you contributed a detection rule, for example, only one in Sigma, let's say in a project Sigma for the year, you helped someone out there. Maybe you helped that person to think about that threat. Maybe you help somebody to have it run it in their environment and maybe start some questions. Wait, why we don't see data? We actually simulating, nothing happened. Why this is not? You're actually helping someone. You're providing that input or maybe feedback that a company needed, for example, or somebody in the community starting learning about threat research. They might want to learn, and maybe your rule help them understand, what else they can do with the technology, telemetry, etc. There's a lot of one detection rule goes ways, right? Now, one of the things that I like about, for example, there is 2 athletes from the UFC that when they became champions, Rose Namajunas and also Brandon Moreno, they were both saying, I am the best before the fight was started. And of course they won. And then they asked, for example, Rose Namajunas, you were telling yourself that you're the best. Why is that? And she answered, because I'm the best. And that's it, plain and simple, I'm the best. So you also have to understand that you're the best. And if you doubt of yourself, try to understand what you did before so that maybe you can go back to this stage where you feel more comfortable. Brando Moreno, soy el mejor, soy el mejor, soy el mejor. Lo dijo muchas veces. He said that so many times. And it's amazing because that actually, I really identify myself a lot when that happened with both, right? Because sometimes we have to say that to ourselves in order to feel better. And remember, somebody might be asking, what does it have to do with, right, a collaboration? It has a lot to do, right? Because if you don't feel comfortable doing it, it's not going to happen. Do not freeze. And this is where we come back to why it is good sometimes to have imposter syndrome. Because if you can handle it properly, if you take that and make it a positive thing, you might mix that with curiosity and say, well, I don't feel good at this, but I'm not going to freeze. I'm not going to stop here. I'm going to actually go and do something about it. So that's the positive thing, in my opinion, that understanding and then channel it in a positive way. Also, do not compare yourself with somebody else if you cannot make it a positive experience, because by nature we will compare ourselves with somebody else, but do it as a way of admiration and see maybe as a roadmap. Now, some people say compare only yourself with yourself from yesterday. Try to be better than yourself from yesterday. Makes sense, but you go back to the same cycle. I'm not good enough. Man, yesterday I knew this, and today I didn't know anything. Sometimes you just have to tell yourself during the weekend that you are the best, and that's it, and keep it at that, right? So keep that in mind, and it is powerful, and it definitely helps you to clear your mind, you relax a little bit, but also not freeze and continue your journey. For example, one thing, talking about phrases, I, for example, tell myself, I was scared about the keynote, but then I told myself, I'm going to do a presentation in Spanish, and at the same time, I'm going to do a keynote the next day in English. Back in 2007, I could not speak English. And to me, that's very powerful to me, right? Because going through a whole journey of doing cybersecurity, doing more than cybersecurity through this whole over 10 years, but it's amazing just to go back to that. So I had to remind myself of something that I did that might be a small win for a lot of people, but for me, it's a big win. And that makes me go through, right? Through these tasks, right? These challenges sometimes. So I hope that you can also find yourself and find what it is that doesn't let you freeze and let you keep going. The other thing in the poll was, I don't know how to do this. And that's also true. And I like some of the comments from Julio Ureña and also Jared Atkinson, for example, talking about that there needs to be some type of roadmap. How can we help people internally, but also externally, to understand what the maybe priorities might be, right? Build this, I would say, road of opportunities for someone to say, oh, okay, I can help with this, I can help with that. For example, if you go to the OSIM detection model project, the link is at the bottom, we started doing this, for example, trying to tag some features. It requires some research. So we provide opportunities for others to see what it is that we need. Maybe we might not have the time. We all use our work time, sometimes free time. So why not also have that for somebody to use? And of course, something like Sigma has labels that are all called create pull, right? Create pull requests. So you can look for those even in GitHub. You can look for those that say need help, for example, in GitHub. And you will identify a lot of projects in InfoSec, for example, that do have that. So an easier way to identify some of those opportunities. And the other one, of course, if you don't know how, so there's a big difference on knowing what to do, right? What it is that I want to do, but then knowing how to actually even start contributing. And I hope that this slide helps you a lot. This is what I do. So for example, download Git, clone a project, fork a project. Then you clone that fork. You enter the project, change the directories to the project. You create a local branch, make any changes, as simple as a typo. You're starting somewhere. You're starting to at least interacting with the project or getting to know the people behind the project. Then you, of course, change the local index and you submit those changes, commit those changes locally. And then you can push that, update the remote references of your own fork. And then when you go back to the fork through the UI, you will see a message where you can click on and you can create a pull request. And at the end, you're going to then go through the whole process to then see what it is that your request is doing. Maybe it might go through a few validation processes and you will interact with people behind it. So remember, this is so powerful. All these commands, that's exactly what I use. I might add a couple of other things that go along with my organization, some steps, some best practices maybe that I need to do. But if you just want to start, that's it. In one slide, you can start your contributions because you are one pull request away, maybe, from contributing to something internally or externally. And at the end, of course, if you want to do something about a project, remember, it's not restructuring a whole code. You can change something as simple as a documentation. So the call to action, right? Now that we have all these resources, we talked about, once again, all the way from working together, understanding what it is that we have to do, try to understand and define processes that could help us go fast, but also go far, care about each other so that we can understand our strengths, our weaknesses, right? Then also, understand what it is that will help you to continue and not freeze, right? Maybe once again, add curiosity to the mix of imposter syndrome, and that will be a very, very powerful tool. Now we can start thinking, okay, so Roberto talked about a few projects that I can map to my process, but what else is out there? And this is just a very small list because there is a lot in every single section. For example, if you want to do something, maybe start adding new techniques to MITRE ATT&CK. You don't have to, in my opinion, be an expert. You can actually have questions. Go to the MITRE ATT&CK channels, Slack channels, for example, and ask the questions like, hey, does this technique exist? I don't see it. Maybe it could be one. Maybe you might be wrong or you might be right, but you get that interaction. You're contributing, you're providing feedback. And on purpose, I do have help with documentation and provide feedback in every single, I would say, category of how a project is mapped, right, to threat research. Because that's all sometimes what you need to do. Providing the feedback is huge. One of the only request, one of the only requests, for example, for the Sigma project is feedback. We want feedback on the rules. So when you share that detection, there is this new technique that came out. You understand it with your research team. You share that detection. You empower others in the community, right, to expedite that process. But at the same time, when you do your research, you provide some of the feedback and you say, hey, this rule is great, but you have to filter out all these maybe DLLs, processes, etc. That's going to be very powerful because the community needs more of that. And maybe the other person grabs it and say, oh, by the way, you missed this other process, for example, it needs to be filtered out. Of course, with the assumption that those filters, right, are going to get you closer to the behavior. But that's when you start getting this collaboration process going on with the community. And the same thing happens internally. Everything that we have talked about, once again, translates to internal projects, etc. Even talking about GitHub or anything that you use to go through the whole life cycle of a project. Understand that first, and you will be, in my opinion, you will be ready to start contributing, creating roadmaps, etc., for something that you believe is something that needs to happen in your organization. Also, for example, share data sets, right? Share also how you're testing a few things. And at the end, also maybe start sharing some of those detection rules or notebooks that could expedite the analysis process for others in general. So there is a lot to go through here. And I hope that this helps you at least to think about what it is that you're doing and how you can map it back to an open source contribution. So doing something similar like this is going to be powerful. And I hope that when you go back to your company, you can start thinking about these processes and maybe start aligning things with open source as well. There is a Discord server that I run with others in the community where we talk about some initiatives to create trainings, maybe talk about open source tools. In general, we want to encourage that. And we also want you to feel that you belong to this community. We, once again, accept any type of background. You don't have to be an expert. Your feedback is going to be very, very important, no matter what level or how expert maybe you might feel in something. So please keep that in mind. And at the same time, don't be afraid to be unique. Don't be afraid to be different, because that's, once again, so powerful. And you might be bringing things to the table that someone didn't even think of. And once again, do not freeze, right? Use the curiosity to continue. And I hope that you also enjoy this conference, all the presentations today. There's going to be a lot of people that also might have the imposter syndrome, and they did everything possible just to share something with you so that you can benefit from. So thank all the speakers that have talked yesterday, have talked today. Thank people that are helping the community, that helped you maybe last year and you didn't say anything because it happens, right? Maybe we were afraid to saying thank you. The other person might think that maybe I'm not that good enough. So forget about all that and maybe start interacting with those that are there for you, understand who you are. Thank you very much for the opportunity. Once again, the Sense Summit, and I hope that this was helpful, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks, Roberto. Your hallway channel, by the way, is on fire right now.
Oh, really? Is that a good thing or a bad thing? I have to think.
Oh, it's a good thing.
Yeah.
It's on fire in a good way, because I think this talk has really been inspirational to myself and a lot of the people, and that's what they're talking about in Slack. I do have a few questions from the Slack and from the Zoom Q&A. I guess the first one is, how can you make management understand that sharing your information and your work with the broader community is going to return value to the company in the end?
That's a great question. And I think that when there is a contribution, in my opinion, there needs to be additional processes in place. If you contribute something, let's say a detection rule, don't just let it end there and then forget about it and just go on with your day and maybe do something else. Maybe if you share a detection, share it with others, not just only through GitHub, but share it with others and get feedback. Maybe reach out to people that understand some of those topics. Maybe some of those, for example, teams that are sharing tools to validate some of these detections. Bring those contributions to those conversations, so that way you can get more feedback, right? For example, one thing that I'm doing currently is every time I build a detection for one of the tools out there, it's called AAD Internals by Dr. Nestori, Dr. Asher AD in Twitter. We talk about some of that over Wednesdays. Like every Wednesday, we just meet for a couple minutes and we talk about it. And sometimes those conversations of a contribution turns into like, hey, you know what? But there was something else that we could do here. There is a new data source that maybe you should enable. And we exchange those ideas. So you can do more about the contribution that would align with what you want in your organization. So one of them is we want feedback. Every detection that we share, for example, the Mystic team, feedback is huge, because we only, I would say, work with the data that we have based from customers, maybe, research lab environments. But if a contribution to the community turns into identifying something that we maybe missed, that's a big win. So identifying what that it is in your specific process, once again, it doesn't have to be a detection, but I think that that's, in my opinion, how you show that value, to your management, that something that you're doing is actually giving you value. Feedback from the world, in my opinion, is very, very powerful.
Yeah, okay, excellent. Another question from the Slack is, do you find that by encouraging others to tell themselves that they're the best, that they might be creating their own kind of echo chamber? The original question uses the words like arrogance and vanity.
Yeah.
And does that maybe lead people to believe that they're better at it than they actually are, and then bring in like the Dunning-Kruger effect and things like that?
Yes. No, that's a great question. That's what I wanted to align it with, for example, imposter syndrome. Because imposter syndrome, in my opinion, based on my experience, it's something that it's going to be there always, as it's like a natural feeling. And for those that feel that way, there is going to be times where you have to say that to yourself in order to feel comfortable, and of course validating it with what you did. And I think that at the same time, you're going to go back to feeling the same way, like maybe next week, maybe next month. So the idea here is not just to say I'm the best all the time and then I just believe it and then I just go with my life thinking I'm just the best, right? I think it's just one coping mechanism that needs to be used in a healthy way. And I believe that there needs to be other mechanisms that in my opinion, balance like you telling yourself you're the best. Like, for example, if you align let's say I tell myself I'm the best this weekend because I believe that I've done a lot, all right? At the same time, I care about the people that I'm working with. I care about what others also are going through. So at the same time, I need to be empathetic. I can't just come out and say like, hey, just ask me anything because I'm the best. I'm not thinking about what my words or my attitude is actually doing to others that might not be feeling like they're the best and might not having a good day. And you're just reinforcing that they are not good enough and you are the best in the team. That's to me how it needs to be used in a responsible way, but also adding other characteristics of yourself in order to control that potential feeling that you're the best all the time. So that's what I see it as a coping mechanism into some of people that feel that way. And I believe that it's very important to understand also how others feel if you start going up every day saying that to everybody. So I think that it kind of like needs some type of filter, right? When you want to use something like that. That's just my opinion, right? There's other people that might think in a different way, but it has helped me a lot to relax a couple of weekends. Just say, well, the Roberto from Friday, I think we've done enough. Comes back Monday and I feel that I've not done anything, right? But at least I enjoy my weekend a little bit. And I think that it helps me to reset myself, and then just help me just to make sure that I can have a healthier life. So use it, of course, responsibly.
I mean, it sounds like almost like you're saying, like, you can be the best. That doesn't mean other people aren't really great at it too. So
Exactly.
being the best doesn't mean you have to push everybody else down so you can be the
Exactly.
best. Yeah.
100%.
Perfect. Well, thanks very much. I think, like I said, that was I think that was a really inspirational talk, and people are just chatting away about it in your hallway, and you have a few more questions in there and everything. So I'm gonna let you go. We'll go into our break now, and I hope you'll have time to hop into the hallway and answer some of those questions and interact with some of your new fans.
Awesome. Thank you very much, David. And once again, thank you everybody for the opportunity, and enjoy the rest of your conference. So thank you.